Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. Returning guest Joshua Goldie of Source Gaming returns as we talk about Dear Me, I Was, the new game from the folks behind Another Code and Hotel Dusk. We dig into the Switch 2 exclusive, what it means for the future of Arc System Works, and what order you should eat breakfast in. Plus, we give some closing thoughts on Donkey Kong Bananza. And in the feature, I take you inside the Shape of Mother exhibit in Shibuya, showcasing over 180 clay figures from the Earthbound series. Let's jump into the games with Joshua Goldie and chat Dear Me, I Was. Today in the game section, we are looking at Dear Me, I Was, a new game from Arc System Works, but one with a lot of Nintendo history behind it. Joining me to chat about it is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, it's been a while. It's me, Josh Goldie from the Nintendo Chronicler and Source Gaming.
Thanks for joining me yet again. I typically invite you on to talk about a retro game. Earlier this year, we talked about Moon, a remix RPG, but we're talking about a brand new game, and one that's probably flown under a lot of people's radar, but it has a much stronger connection to Nintendo than a lot of people realize. So give us the lowdown. What is Dear Me, I Was?
Yeah, so Dear Me, I Was is the latest narrative game by Arc System Works. Specifically, though, from Arc System Works, it's by the art director Taisuke Kanasaki. He's the most notable figure on it because he is the art director of the Another Code and Hotel Dusk series by Nintendo. And you can really tell when you take a look at the game. It is very much his art style that you will have seen recently on the Another Code Recollection remake on Nintendo Switch. Ever since they left Cing, ever since Cing went under in like 2010 or whatever it was, they all moved over to Arc System Works, and they've mostly worked in the background on other projects, but they've made 3 games under Arc System Works. The Another Code Recollection is the big one. They did a game called Chase for 3DS, which is kind of a spiritual successor to Hotel Dusk, but a bit disappointing, in my opinion. And then Dear Me, I Was is their latest one, which decides not to be a spiritual successor to either Another Code or Hotel Dusk, but this interactive short story that's about life. It follows this girl from when she was a young child to when she was an old lady, and it just goes through her entire life in a really emotional capacity. Visual, audio, it's all designed to make you well up a little bit. But it's very different from Another Code and Hotel Dusk. It has the same look to it, and I reckon if you saw both games side by side, you might even think that this is some sort of spin-off or sequel to Another Code. But it's really a very different game that uses the same art director and has the same art style, and probably a lot of the same team behind it. I haven't looked at the whole credits list, but I imagine it's a lot of the same people.
Yeah, this was announced in the Arc System Works showcase in June, and for me, it was easily the biggest announcement there. And the art director, like you said, is Taisuke Kanasaki, who was the director of Another Code and Hotel Dusk. And as we discussed on our Another Code episode, a lot of Cing folks are now at ArcSys. Were you surprised to see that a new quote-unquote Cing game was coming out so soon?
So this one's a bit weird. I wonder how much should be said about it. I believe Dear Me, I Was leaked slightly, like a month or so earlier. We didn't actually know what it was. We just knew it was I think we got like one screenshot and we knew it was a game by Taisuke Kanasaki. And so that was like, I guess when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, we're getting a new game from them already, one that's not Hotel Dusk. But I think my thought was like, when thinking about a Hotel Dusk remake, one of the big questions that's on everyone's mind is how they're going to do the art style. Because unlike Another Code, that game had a very specific way it portrayed its characters that would be lost if they just jumped to 3D models like they did with Another Code. So when I saw this game and I saw it was all 2D watercolor animated using rotoscoping to get the animation in, my initial thought was like, oh, this is cool. This is exactly what I think they should do for a Hotel Dusk remake. Oh, this is sick. So I guess that was my first thought, was unfortunately thinking about another game series. But it was cool to see Dear Me, I Was pop up. I think I also had thoughts of Chase in my mind, though, which put me a bit cautious, because I don't think Chase is a particularly great game. I'm trying to remember the full title of it. It was a 3DSware game that was basically just as short as Dear Me I Was, but was actually trying to be adventure detective game. So it was like, it felt like it was just getting started and then it ends. So it was very disappointing. And so I had slight hesitations as well when I saw Dear Me I Was, because I was like, I suspect this will be a lot shorter, especially given the time frame between Another Code and when this is coming out. Will it be another chase situation where there's like a tiny story going on here that doesn't pay off satisfyingly? But I was wrong. I was mistaken. It's a very different type of game.
Yeah, a short game, but one with I would say, a big story, considering the length of time it covers. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there were rumors that Arc System Works was working on a spiritual successor to their Cing games, or even a Hotel Dusk remake. And yes, at least that first part is true. And yeah, Kanazaki is working on this game. And this game is also a Switch 2 exclusive, but it is not published by Nintendo. Josh, any guesses as to why this is a Switch 2 only game?
I was wondering that when I was playing it, because it does have mouse mode controls, but the mouse mode controls actually kind of feel a bit half-baked. Like, they don't work on the main menu. You have to press the A button to interact with stuff instead of the R button. You can just use the touchscreen instead to do everything. That was like probably my only complaint about this game, is the mouse controls. I think it was a Switch 2 exclusive because, and this is a bit of like, I don't know if you call it insider knowledge or stuff like that, stuff that's been heard through the scenes, is that it was meant to be a Switch 2 launch game. So it was meant to come out back in June and then was pushed back a month or so. No idea why it was. But yeah, it was, as far as I'm aware, I believe it was meant to be revealed back in April and launch in June, along with some other games that are also still not out yet for Switch 2. So that could be why. Because there are a lot of Switch 2 launch games that are Switch 2 exclusive for some reason, like Bravely Default Remake. There's nothing about it that needs to be a Switch 2 game, but it is.
Right.
So that's my guess, anyway. That's why I think it's a Switch 2 exclusive.
All right, let's get into the game. The premise is that it follows the life of a young Japanese woman. Now, we are going to try to dodge spoilers, but the entire game is basically just a story.
Yeah.
Can you fill us in? Can you fill us in on the structure of the game?
So it's chapter by chapter. Each chapter is probably like 5 to 10 minutes, and you go and you just watch a significant part of her life. So obviously we're trying to dodge spoilers, but I don't think it's a spoiler to say that chapter 1 is when she is a child, like a young child, and you see her with her parents and you see what her life is like, and the very brief forms of interaction you get are using the controller or the mouse or the touchscreen to scribble on a notebook or eat breakfast. Eat breakfast is a very common one. Almost every chapter starts with you eating breakfast, which I think is quite funny. And yeah, very brief interactions every minute or so, and you just watch the cutscene play out. And then once that significant moment of her life has ended, then it will move on to the next chapter. And it's not like each chapter is a specific age in her life. Like, there's quite a few chapters where she's an adult or a young adult, and it shows, like, it's just about moments, key moments that had a strong impact on the way her life would turn out.
Yeah, I would describe it as one long cutscene with light interactive elements. You could call it a visual novel, but there's no reading. There's literally no dialogue, no text. What did you think about the execution of an entire game basically being one long wordless cutscene?
I thought it was really good. I wasn't expecting it when I was going into it. I wasn't expecting how light the gameplay would be either. So after chapter 1 ended, and I was like, oh, there's going to be like no dialogue in this game. It's just going to be the visuals. I sort of buckled myself into that to see how much it would keep up. And it does a pretty good job. And I think you can thank the art style for that. The visuals, the watercolor visuals, are super good at getting expression across. You can tell what a character is thinking, the emotions that they're feeling, by the slight changes in the expressions on the character. I think that's a part of this game that really needs all the praise heaped upon it, because it just wouldn't work if the actors doing the rotoscoping didn't want acting in such minute, tiny ways to get across emotion, and if the art style then didn't so amazingly copy that over and present it to us in a game. It's so well done that it makes the game work without dialogue.
Yeah, I feel like it does kind of make you focus on the game more. Like with visual novels, sometimes you're just jamming A to get to the next text box.
Mm-hmm.
But here you do need to pay attention because you can't go back or anything during the game, at least to my knowledge.
No.
And I think some of the more ambiguous elements that naturally arise because of the wordless nature of the game do make it a bit more of a thinker, a bit more provocative than if you were just reading dialogue boxes.
Yeah. There's definitely
Now,
some chapters where I think the interpretation of what is happening, it's up for interpretation.
Yeah, it is. I don't want to say vague or mysterious or anything, but since it kind of jumps to different points in our life, you do kind of need to fill in the gaps. And there aren't really a lot of concrete answers as to, oh, this happened and this is why this happened. So oftentimes it is a good point of discussion. You could definitely, get into a spoiler cast and talk about, oh, why did she make this decision? Or what did you think about that? So that part is really great. Now, the game also has some light interactive elements, emphasis on light. How did you feel about the gameplay segments?
Yeah, they're very innocuous, very unneeded. I feel like they're only there just to justify it as a game. Like, I thought initially at the start you'd get to draw like it was a proper DS game, but actually no, you just have to scribble out a vague, like what's it called? When you have a piece of charcoal on a piece of paper and there's something underneath it and you scribble the charcoal on it, an image appears. It's basically just doing that for stuff, and then maybe you'll pick up a seashell at one point, and I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know if that actually impacts the game itself. I think that's the thing. Like the seashell example is one that you do, and the seashell shows up again like throughout the game in the background, and it's the seashell I clicked on. But I don't know if that's just a coincidence that I clicked on the right seashell that the story wanted me to, or if it didn't matter which one I clicked on. It would have all been there. But that's basically all the interactivity amounts to. The best interactivity is deciding what order you eat breakfast in. Because you can be a complete psychopath and eat your broccoli first, gulp down the coffee, and eat the bread in like 3 bites. At some point during the game, I was just starting to see what deranged order could I have my breakfast in. What's the worst possible way to eat this meal?
Yeah, I like eating the food, and you can pick what you want to eat when, so you can just drink all your coffee at the very end.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do think having to do the action, it does make some moments a bit more significant. No spoilers, but there is a scene at a restaurant, and you have to do something at the restaurant. And I think actually having to do it, instead of just watching it play out, that really adds to the game.
You're right about that. I didn't think about that, but there are definitely some moments in this where the player having to take that step for her does it make the scene more impactful. I guess for me, they're fewer than they are many, but I suppose you need the many in order for the few ones to make sense to inform the player. Because I know when the game starts off, it starts off on a blank white screen, and it took me like a couple seconds to realize, oh, I'm controlling.
Yeah. Now we're going to dance around spoilers, but what did you think about the overall story of the game?
Yeah, it's good. I felt bad for a few of the characters in the story. I think that's the point, really. There's one part particularly towards the end where I was like, this feels completely unnecessary game. What the heck?
Yeah.
what the heck?
Can she catch a break? Like, what's
yeah,
going
I know,
on?
right? But it's got some sweet moments in it when things start turning around. I think the allegories that it uses throughout when she's a kid, when she's a teenager, and it's showing you the world around through colour, and then when she's an adult and how the colour sort of swaps around, and you can get her emotional state based on the colour that they use for her character more than other people. I think that it's very good at making you feel bad for her, but also feeling happy for her when it turns around and things improve and she decides, like, forget about this, I'm going to focus on doing this now, and I'm going to live my life this way now. You feel good for her, and I think making that emotional connection to that character, they did that very successfully.
Yeah, it is a pretty straightforward story. You're just following a woman's life, but it is genuinely moving. And yeah, like you said, a lot of sad things happen to her. And late in the game, you are wondering, is this just going to get worse and worse? But I guess that is life. And I think the protagonist, it is somewhat unlike what we've seen in a lot of games. We've played as a young Japanese woman before in video games, but they're mostly swinging swords or casting spells and whatnot. But here the protagonist is just a normal woman, and we just see her life play out. And I feel it is a perspective that a lot of video games don't really focus on. And in general, does Dear Me I Was remind you of other games in terms of the story and gameplay structure, or do you feel it's more unique than you expected?
Yeah, it's definitely more unique than I'd expect. I wouldn't say it reminds me of any video game that I've played before. I did a review of this game for Cubed 3. Throughout the whole review, I purposefully did my best to not call it a game. Because really, it is an interactive story. The website for the game calls it an interactive story. When they tweet it out, the Taisuke Kanasaki called it interactive short film. Nobody's calling it a game officially. And I think that is the best way to look at it. It's not really a game. It is just a film that you watch where occasionally you have to press a button and do something. And because of that, it's unlike any game I've ever felt like playing. It's not sort of the game I would usually want to play, but I was drawn to it by its visuals and the prestige of the people working on it, and I'm glad that I did because it was a good experience.
Yeah, I'm not much of a big visual novel gamer, so take this with a grain of salt, but I don't think I've ever played a game like this that is essentially just a long cutscene. And yeah, of course, the rotoscoped watercolor art style, that's so distinct to Cing, and it's great to see that come back. And once you see this game, you instantly make that connection to the past games. Now, this game, it's $8 and about 40 minutes to complete. So again, why did they make a cheap 40-minute game? Is it purely a test or experiment? A bold artistic statement, or what's your take on this?
Who can really say what intent is? I think there might be two things behind it, and this is all speculation from me. I think, one, they had a short story that they wanted to tell. They just wanted to tell this little story, emotional story about life, the art guy, the music guy, the actual director of the game, because, well, we keep putting him forward because it's his art style, and he is the one that they tend to be putting forward for this. He's not actually the director or the producer, that's someone else, right. Or the writer. He just did all the artwork. But I think they just had a story that they wanted to tell and thought that this visual style would work for it. But the other reason, I think, is like a technical test. Again, going back to the Hotel Dusk remake that everyone wants to see after the Another Code remake, the big challenge of that game is its art style. But I think a 2D rotoscoped art style would work really well for the game and capture the art style that it had on the DS quite well in HD. So part of me almost thinks that what they did here was a test to just see how feasible it is, how people would react to it, how it would turn out. Like, do it on a smaller project, get all the tech stuff done, and then use it for a much bigger project afterwards.
I don't know.
That's a bit conspiracy theory from me, because I think I really want to see that Hotel screen.
Yeah, I think we all do. And yeah, I don't know why they made this or if it will turn a profit, but I do like that a month into the Switch 2's life, hey, there's an exclusive game from quote unquote Cing on the hardware, and it's maybe an hour long. And a lot of people complain that Switch 2 isn't weird or whatever, but I would say this game is at least somewhat adjacent to quote unquote Nintendo weird in terms of being what it is and coming out when it did. All right, last question before we move on to the next game. You got to make a Smash moveset for the protagonist. What are her moves?
You can get for the down special, you can pick up a box of cats. It's like pick Olimar and Pikmin, you got the cats following you around. For the neutral special, for the side special, you get an easel appears in front of you.
Oh, okay,
and
that's
you can paint if you go up and it's like a multi-step one, like Villager's Tree. So actually, maybe this should be the down special.
Yeah.
You can paint a drawing, and then depending on what's painted, something happens. Neutral special, you throw breakfast food items at people.
Yeah, she could pop bubbles. I think her final smash should just be the eating cutscene.
Yeah.
And I would like to see a rotoscoped watercolor character in Smash Brothers that just completely clashes with the art style. I think that would be rad.
Maybe that's how they do Ashley.
Yeah. I want to call it now. I think Dear Me I Was will have some representation in the next Smash game. Maybe just like a spirit. I'm just going to call it now. If I'm right, I can just clip this out and then post it and then take all the likes on social media. So I'm just going to call it right now. So that was Dear Me I Was, a very unique game on Switch 2. $8, 40 minutes. Do your money to time ratio or just wait for a sale. Now, we're going to also touch on maybe the most distant game from Dear Me I Was, which is Donkey Kong Bananza. I've rolled credits, and you've apparently 100%ed it, so I want to hear your thoughts on Donkey Kong Bananza.
They're both stories about a young girl. Like,
that is true.
No way. Donkey Kong Bananza is great. I loved it. Like, it's a real debate in my head about whether it or Mario Odyssey is better. Because like they're both different games, but they're also both very similar in structure and like objective design and stuff like that. But Mario is more of a platformer, whereas Donkey Kong is more of a big ape simulator. Smash everything, ride around on the land, punch enemies in the face, just go big monkey mode. Donkey Kong is like really fun. Like, even though I have 100% completed the game, I'm still, part of me is like, well, could I just play it again for like 20 minutes? Well, how long would it take me to just destroy this entire layer if I attempted that? Should I do the final boss section again, like just for funsies?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many good parts of that game.
Yeah, it completely exceeded my expectations. I felt the game just got better and better as it went along. And again, like Dear Me, we were trying to be spoiler-free as possible. But did the game instantly click for you, or was there a point later in the game where you realized, whoa, this game actually has a lot more juice than I imagined?
Yeah, I think it was probably in the layer after the lagoon layer. Oh, no, maybe even when you drop down into the second part of the lagoon layer. Because after I first played the lagoon layer, sub-layer, I was like, all right, yeah, like, this is fun. It's fun to go around. It's fun to destroy things, try and find as much hidden stuff as possible. But that's all I'm doing. Like, smashing stuff, having the occasional chat with another monkey, maybe finding a puzzle here or there. But is that what the whole game is going to be like? Is it just going to be going layer to layer, find all the bananas, layer to layer? And the game is kind of like that. But I think structure-wise, once you get to the second layer and they're like, oh, all the water's lower down, we need to get the water back up, and you have to go and find the things to destroy. And actually getting there is a bit of a platform challenge. There's even one that requires you to go back up to come back down again. Is like I started making it a bit more interesting for me. I was like, oh, I see what they're doing with the levels now. Like, it's not just one big open world like Mario Odyssey is. It's like multi-layered worlds where you need to go up to go down and down to go up, and
right.
So the level structure is a lot more interesting, and some of these sub-levels are designed around specific things. Like the canyon one has a whole minecart section as its second sub-layer. And sub-layers are just there for boss fights. And the more I got into the game, the more source it was presenting me. And I was like, yeah, got it. This is awesome, actually. And now that I'm pretty much past World War and I'm super into it, I'm sure they've got a lot more exciting stuff coming up as well.
Yeah, speaking on the sublayers, sometimes it just turns into a totally different world almost, where you think, oh, this is the ice world. And then you go down. It's like, oh, actually, no, it's not the ice world at all. It's something totally different.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it really hit when I got to SL 400, and then I went back to SL 100, the lagoon layer, and using what I've learned about how the levels are designed and what DK can do, I explored more of that area, and then I had a much better appreciation for the game. And especially once you understand what DK can do, his moveset, I think that it unlocks more fun that you can have, because his moveset is just so complex, but in a good way. There's so many things you can do, and I'm still trying to master what's the best way to move about. Oh, you need the turf surf, and then you need the jump, and then you need to swing while you turf surf, and then throw it down, and then if you do the down punch, you kind of go up a little bit, and then you cancel that, and then you roll, and then you clap. There's so much fun things you can combo together. And were you clearing out areas 100% before moving on, or did you go back and clean up a lot of it during the post game?
No, I was doing everything 100% as I went along. That's how my brain works. I think the only layer I didn't do 100% before I moved on were the first layer, where I didn't get all the fossils, just because at that point in time I hadn't discovered the ability to be able to find the fossils more easily, because the first layer doesn't have a shop in it other than the clothes shop. So yeah. Like, I couldn't be bothered to keep looking for them, because I think I needed like 3, and I had no clue where they were. So I just moved on. But then I went back and did that later. And then there was a layer later on where I didn't clear it 100%, and that's because the game sort of forced me to move on.
Right.
I sort of hit a point where I was like, oh, wait, now I have to keep going. Whoops. But other than those two, every other layer, I was like, where's every banana? Where's every fossil? I got to do this before I jump down that big hole.
Yeah, for me, I kind of did a typical mix of exploration, but also following the story. And right now I'm revisiting a lot of the past levels to get all the bananas. And I am very surprised at revisiting these past levels. I checked my map and I've collected like 18 out of 60 bananas. How is this even possible? I felt like I literally went everywhere, but the levels are much more complex and dense than a lot of people expect. And again, light spoilers, I guess, but do have a favorite layer.
Yeah, I do, but it is a spoiler. It's like not the penultimate layer, but the layer before the penultimate layer.
Okay.
Don't know what you'd call it. It's like the last big area before it really starts being very story focused.
So this is the spiritual successor to Odyssey. So of course it does have some additional content after you roll the credits. What did you think about the post-game content?
Yeah, there's less post-game here than there was in Odyssey. And a lot of it is very similar to Odyssey, where they just add in a bunch of bananas that were like common bananas that you could find in every level, but some levels just didn't have them inexplicably. Because obviously the fractones aren't introduced till sublayer 200. So sublayer 100 doesn't have any of the fractones, the related bananas in them, like it doesn't have the getaways and stuff. So it adds all that in post-game. So like it's a bit less than I expected, because I remember Mario Odyssey's post-game taking me a good while to go through, and Donkey Kong's doesn't have that same feeling to it. But what it does have is the typical challenge levels where now you're testing all of your platforming capabilities in a super hard run. The dark side of the moon and the darker side of the moon from Mario Odyssey, it has its equivalent of them, but based around all the Bonanza powers. And that was pretty fun, but the only one of them I found a real challenge was the last one. Even then, really, I think some of the challenge came from the fact that each of those have balloons in them, and if you get all 5 balloons, you get a CD, and they're very easy to miss, so if I missed one, I'd die and go back to the start to try and get it again. So I think that added to the difficulty. If I was ignoring them or not caring, it might have been a much smoother experience. But maybe I'm just really good at Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of the post-game content right now, and I'm almost done, I think. I do like that a lot of the challenges are completely different from what you've done in the main game. The game in general is really excellent at introducing new ideas all the time, and every level has some new mechanic that you really never see again, and the post-game content takes advantage of all these ideas and kind of mashes them together, and then also kind of elevates them to the next level. And there are definitely some frustrating ones, though, but maybe I just need to get good. What did you think about the challenge of the game overall, especially compared to Odyssey?
I don't think Odyssey is a very difficult game from my memory. It's been years since I played it. Donkey Kong, I want to say Donkey Kong's a bit more challenging. The bosses, in typical Nintendo fashion, vary between being extremely easy to being actually quite a challenge to play through. But I feel like I died more here in Donkey Kong than I did in Mario Odyssey. So it's probably more difficult based on that logic.
I always try to think, okay, if you fall in a hole in Mario, does that quote unquote count as a death, as it did once upon a time? I did that maybe quite a bit in Odyssey, and in Donkey Kong, you mostly die from getting KO'd by an enemy.
Yeah.
Because if you fall off, you know, you've got the balloon mechanic to save you. And it is very cheap to stock up on balloons. I think I've had 30 balloons the entire game. But definitely in the post game, there are some tough segments or some maybe sanity testing segments, I would call them.
Yeah, post-game challenges are definitely designed to be difficult and test your knowledge of each of the Bonanza powers and Donkey Kong's own moveset. And some of the secret bananas are also definitely based around like how well you know Donkey Kong's abilities and how well you can chain them off together. But the main story, I wouldn't say is too hard. Maybe a bit towards the end, where enemies are a bit tougher and there's a few more instant death things. Like you can't, if you fall off, then you get saved by a balloon. But like that doesn't stop you when there's like lava or something around from just being burnt up.
All right, again, I guess light spoilers, or we're going to try to dance around this, but what did you think about the end segment of the game?
End segment's incredible. Like this is one place where it absolutely succeeds over Mario Odyssey. The ending portion is so good. Like everything from the penultimate area of the game to the ending of the game is a really good vibe. It's really good as in like it's got a vibe to it, not so much it's good vibe. But then everything it does story-wise and stage-wise throughout that, and the final level in particular, the build-up towards the end of the game, it's all so hype. It's also like fun to see, and then that last boss section is it's great. It's up there with the end of Mario Odyssey as being one of those best endings to a Nintendo game out there. And I feel like this one's a lot more bombastic, and they went a lot harder with this one than what they did with Mario Odyssey. So I want to put this one above it.
Yeah, I totally agree. The whole end segment of the game, even, I guess there is like a pretty good thorough line. Again, this game, it kind of just gets better and better. So it feels like it's just ramping up. Even from, I guess there's a plot element, and then you need to save somebody, for example. And even that to the ending, you could maybe consider it that's like one long story beat, and it just ramps up more and more exciting. And yeah, the final section is just pure Nintendo spectacle. It is somewhat similar to Odyssey, where you do think, whoa, I can't believe this is what I'm doing. Yeah, they totally nail it. Even like really, really small touches. For example, in the last area, as you progress, it kind of tells you the section name. Even like that section name is like, oh, this is such a great idea. They totally just nail it. I would probably give, to be honest, I would maybe give Tears of the Kingdom a little bit of an edge over this ending. But Tears of the Kingdom is a little bit harder to top. But I've definitely seen a lot of people say, oh, this is the best ending for a Nintendo game ever. And it's one of those things where, okay, maybe I don't 100% agree, but it's a very logical and sane idea that this is maybe one of the best endings of a Nintendo game.
It's definitely up there at the very least.
Yes. So what's next for DK? And I guess Mario. Odyssey came out, and we thought this is the next step for the Mario series. But it was kind of the only step, because we never got an Odyssey 2. And this is the closest thing to that. Do you see DK kind of, I guess, hijacking the Odyssey structure and continuing down that lane while Mario goes off and does something totally different? Or what's your predictions for DK and Mario from now on?
I feel like they're both going to do something different. The 3D Mario team never likes to retread old ground unless they've had too many ideas, aka Mario Galaxy 2, which is basically just glorified DLC. So I never expected an Odyssey 2. I expected the next 3D Mario to be something different as well. I still think there is a 3D Mario coming, because if you look at the credits for Donkey Kong Bananza, there are quite a few names from Mario Odyssey, some key names that are just missing, which sort of says to me that Donkey Kong Bananza is made by a secondary team within Nintendo Tokyo. I think during the Developer Asks interview, they even sort of brought up that it was a much younger team. Kind of like what they did with Splatoon and Animal Crossing, where it was originally just the Animal Crossing team, then they took all the younger developers and were like, go make a game. I want to say they did a similar thing where they took the younger devs and were like, all right, we're going to make a Donkey Kong game. Leave the older guys to do the next Mario. So I do think another 3D Mario is coming. I do question whether or not it is a Odyssey-like Mario game or a 3D World-like Mario game, because they were both done by that team, and they're both great ways to go. 3D Odyssey type is obviously the one I think a lot of people want to see, but 3D World was also excellent, and it wouldn't clash so much with Donkey Kong. So I could see 3D World sequel, let's call it Super Mario 3D Galaxy or something, and have that come out next year. Because I don't think it's too far off the next proper Mario game. It's obviously Mario's anniversary this year, but I don't think we'll see a 3D Mario this year. I think that'll be next year at the earliest. Regarding Donkey Kong, they said in the developer ask that Donkey Kong Bananza is like them making a 3D Donkey Kong in the same way that Mario has his 2D and 3D series. So there's very clear intent, I think, from the developers to keep the Donkey Kong games going, with like 2D Donkey Kong games and 3D Donkey Kong games. It'll be interesting to see if the 2D Donkey Kong games are done by them as well, or if it's going to be like Retro Studios, or if there's going to be another team doing 2D Donkey Kong. But at the very least, I think 3D Donkey Kong, this won't be the last we've seen of it. Now, will it have the same structure as this one? I think it will feel quite similar. I don't necessarily think it'll have the Bonanza powers back. I don't necessarily think it'll be Pauline and Donkey Kong together. I think you can have the stage destruction element of it and the Donkey Kong's movement options, but have some new extra gimmick on top of it that changes up the way you approach platforming in the exact same way Flood did for Sunshine and the Anti-Grav did for Galaxy. Like, I would look at how 3D Mario has evolved and then pair it with Donkey Kong to see what's also stayed the same in every 3D Mario game. to see how the Donkey Kong series is going to go ahead.
Yeah, and whatever route they go down, I'm really excited because, I think this is easily the best Donkey Kong game. Even though, all of the Donkey Kong games are really different from each other, but I guess that's why the series is so interesting. And I think a lot of people have also been kind of they've been on Moby Games or they've been looking at the credits to see, how close is the next 3D Mario? Like, who is working on this? Motokura is working on this game, but Hayashida is not credited, I believe, but he was on Wonder. So is he working on XYZ? And a lot of people are like, well, in 2020, EPD8 merged with other teams. So are there secretly 2 teams in EPD8? And it is a fun kind of, everyone's kind of scanning the credits and trying to point, okay, who is working on what? Because I'm sure a Mario game will be here before we know it.
Yeah,
it won't be 4 years.
Forgotten Mario.
Yes. Even though, many YouTube thumbnails are saying they have, but they have not forgotten Mario. So that was a bit of a wrap up on Donkey Kong Bonanza. Listeners, if you want more, I'm probably going to talk about it a lot in the future on the Game of the Year episode. But in the meantime, Josh, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on the Nintendo Chronicler YouTube channel or on Blue Sky at tenjex.bluesky.social, where I post updates on there. I tend to use that now rather than using Twitter. That site's a bit of a cesspool, so I try and avoid it where I can. But go on there. I released a video about Princess Daisy earlier in July. I have a video about another Mario character coming out shortly. Just been slightly delayed because I've been working on a video game, but that should hopefully be soon because all I need to do is put the footage to it. Everything else is done. And I have been toying around with the idea of a Donkey Kong video, given one of the big questions everyone had coming out of this is, how does this make sense in the timeline? Where does this, how does this work?
We didn't really touch on that, but that's definitely a talking point.
Yeah, so you might see a video about that from me at some point in August. Give it a subscribe and drop me a message, and I'm more than happy to chat about Nintendo.
Great. And the links to everything are in the podcast description, so listeners, check it out. Joshua Goldie, once again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, anytime.
Today's feature is on The Shape of Mother, a new exhibit in Shibuya Parko showcasing the clay figures made for promotional material to advertise Mother and Mother 2, aka Earthbound. Like with all discussion on Earthbound, prepare for a lot of flip-flopping between me saying Mother and me saying Earthbound. But if you've ever poked your nose into the world of Mother/Earthbound, you've absolutely seen these figures. They were created for the instruction manuals and strategy guides for the first 2 Mother games, and they are a pretty memorable element of Earthbound's iconography. People are always saying they should remake Earthbound in the clay figure style. Honestly, I don't know if that would work perfectly, but that just goes to show you how much these figures have resonated with the Earthbound fan base. And now you can see them in person with your own eyes right now in Shibuya, or at least until September 2nd. Some of these figures were shown at a previous exhibition called The Secrets of Mother 2, which I featured before on the podcast, and at that time, I was really surprised that they had them, especially in such great condition. While that exhibition only had a handful, this time they've got what I can only assume is nearly all of them, with over 180 figures in the exhibit. I had no idea that they even made 180 of these things. Of course, I've seen the figures of Ness and Mr. Saturn and Master Belch, but I had no idea Mother 1 specifically had figures of all the characters and enemies. Remember the iconic enemy called Rope, which is a rope? He has a figure. The actual exhibit doesn't go into that much detail about their creation. There's not a whole lot of info behind the scenes, but fortunately, Itoi's website actually had an extensive interview with the creator to promote the exhibit. The man behind the clay figures is named Totori-kun, and he's a clay sculpture artist who had made some fairly well-known pieces before he even got involved with Itoi. He did all the ones for Earthbound Beginnings, and he had help from 2 others for Earthbound. The reason why Totori-kun made them in the first place is really just a matter of circumstance. It's not like Itoi had some brilliant idea to make these clay sculptures. Basically, Itoi's friend, Jun Miura, lived with Totori-kun at one point since they both went to the same art school, and Itoi's assistant knew Miura, and through this connection, Miura basically pitched the idea to make the figures. Itoi liked it, and then Totori-kun started working on them. And that's basically it. That's the origin. Hey, I know a guy who's really good at this. Want him to make some for your game? The interview is really great. It goes into a lot of detail about how they were specifically made, the challenge of converting pixel art into a real 3D object, and a whole lot more. But a lot of that info, ironically, is not at the exhibit, but you do get to see the real deal figures. The exhibit is in Hobonichi's space on the 8th floor of Shibuya Parko, where many other exhibits and Earthbound shops have been hosted. And yes, this is a paid exhibit, so get ready to fork over 1,800 yen. Which honestly is a bit expensive considering you can see the entire exhibit in maybe 15 to 30 minutes depending on how slow you go. But again, these have never been shown before to the public, and it's a well-preserved piece of gaming history. They could have totally just tossed these things 25 years ago and that would be that, but Itoi fortunately had the foresight to keep them. And he was smart to do so because, hey, he's going to make a lot of money off of the exhibit. Now, before we step inside, something you should know, there are no pictures allowed inside the exhibit. There is one photo spot, but you can't take pictures of the figures at the exhibit. Why? I don't know, because photos of them do exist. They were made specifically to have their photos taken. So I'm doing this feature only a few days after I visited, so I won't forget it. But I don't have pictures to cross-reference or jog my memory, but I'll do my best. So let's step inside. The first main area is dedicated to Mother, aka Earthbound Beginnings. The figures are placed in glass cases, so no touching. The placards for all the enemies have their names along with a screenshot of how they looked in the game, which is a great point of reference if you're unfamiliar. I've barely touched Mother 1, so I was really unfamiliar with a lot of the enemies on display. It is really funny to see how just plain a lot of them are. Like, one is just a bear, or a snake. They definitely get a bit wilder when they get to Mother 2. The protagonists get their own little area, and Ninten himself gets his own section. My wife asked about the connection between Ninten and Ness, and listen, like explaining Pauline, there are just some things that are very hard to verbalize to people who are not super deep into the Nintendo sauce. The exhibition room also had some monitors showing off the game, so it was a good mix of physical and digital. The next room is separated by a curtain, and this is where we step into Mother 2. The bulk of the figures were made for Earthbound, so it takes up multiple areas of the exhibition. And in general, the look of the exhibit is fantastic. It's not just a big white room with a lot of displays. The walls have pixel art from the games. Like you go into the Earthbound section and the first thing you see is Onett on the wall. There's even a big standee of the Foresight building with LED lights that change colors. Some of these are reused from past exhibits, but they are used in really effective ways here to delineate the different areas of the exhibit. The statues are very thoughtfully placed, like the evil Mani Mani figure is actually in the corner where the art of Foresight meets the art of Moonside. And above the Runaway 5 is a monitor playing their performance from the game. So the exhibit does a really great job in making each little area feel special. Again, these would be such great photo ops if they would just let you take pictures, but there is one photo spot, and you don't get to take a picture of the figures though, but instead one of yourself. Part of a wall is dedicated to Dungeon Man, and you stick your head in a hole through the wall to look like Brick Road, who was stuck inside Dungeon Man in the game. So this is a weirdly deep cut photo op. But again, if you're going to this exhibit, you probably remember this scene from the game. Sadly, there is no actual clay figure of Dungeon Man, but there is one of Brick Road right next to the photo op. And the figures all look absolutely amazing. Yes, if you really look, maybe you can see some scuffs and damage, but honestly, most of them look brand new. I was a little suspicious and thought, did they just make new ones for the exhibit? But that seems extremely unlikely, and the interview I mentioned earlier actually talks about the restoration process a little bit. Years ago, Bandai made some figures based on these sculptures, and to restore them, Itoi contacted Bandai again, who got them in touch with some sculptors who could restore the figurines. Hobonichi went above and beyond for the exhibit. They could have just tossed him out there with Pooh's arm falling off and people would still go, but there's a lot of care put into the exhibit to make these figurines look like they did all the way back in the 90s. I was also very impressed by the size of them. I think in pictures they do seem fairly small, but I would say most of the figurines are at least 6 inches. And some of the creatures, like the Kraken, are way bigger than I imagined. Kraken was probably the biggest one there, and he had his own box, so he's not going to share space with the other enemies. Another great display section had the bosses from Earthbound circling a monitor showing battles from the game. Diamond Dog was there, and that was one of my favorite pieces on display. The figure really captured his angled look, and while he wasn't shiny like in the game, he did kind of look distinct from the other figures because it did look like he was made out of rubber or some sort of slightly translucent material. Other favorites, Master Belch, you gotta stop and look at him. And since the exhibit is designed so that you can see all the figures with a 360 view, you do get to see behind and around the figures, something that you don't see in static shots. So you can really take in all of Master Belch. One really interesting section is that Paula had her original figure and the clay figure used in the US marketing. There isn't a whole lot of info on the US figures, and the interview with Tortori-kun doesn't touch on them at all, so I do wonder if those were made in the US. They only had the Paula one on display, so I'm wondering if the others were just lost or thrown out by the US marketing team. Though I do wonder why there were even separate clay figures for each region. The US ones do make them look a bit taller and leaner, maybe a little bit older, but again, it was very clear the Japanese and US marketing teams for Earthbound were not on the same page at all. This kind of weird thing would never ever happen again. Now, of course, it is an Earthbound exhibit, so there is a merch area. But considering the size of the exhibit, the merch area was much smaller than past exhibitions. Don't worry though, because on the 6th floor is a special Mother pop-up shop called Mother Shop that sells a lot of classic merch, with the new items being the acrylic standees and shirts featuring the figures. But the big ticket item is the Gold Series figure set, where you can buy miniatures of Ness, Paula, Pooh, Jeff, and Mr. Saturn based on the clay figures. Now, how much do you think this set of 5, maybe 3-inch figures cost? That's right, $230. So about half of a Switch 2. I mean, after seeing the exhibit, miniature figures of the clay models is what you want to buy, but I think I'm good. Also on sale is an issue of Continue magazine that features information about the exhibit and a lot of pictures. Oh, and Mother Shop's big new item is a big plastic figure of the logo, the Mother 2 logo, for about $70. Again, I'm always impressed by how Hobonichi is just able to sell anything from the series. I don't know, have we sold the logo yet? Why waste your time on Mother 4 when you can sell the logo at a higher price than the original game, or even a new game? So that's the Shape of Mother exhibit. Should you check it out? I mean, if you're a big fan of Earthbound, I think it's an easy recommendation. I mean, you can see the clay figures. I'm trying to think of something analogous to this in the gaming world, but honestly, there really isn't anything. I've been to Street Fighter and Dragon Quest exhibits that showcase the original concept art and game documents, but a 3D figure, a tactile piece of art, is a lot different from a piece of paper. It is one of those things that feels surreal to me. Like, I remember seeing these figures in magazines and on the internet as a kid, and now they're right in front of my face. I think even if you don't know anything about Earthbound, you could probably still appreciate the design and artistry of the figures, and the layout of the exhibit is much more thoughtful than I expected. No pictures though, so now is the time to work on developing a photographic memory. That's it for the feature, so let's check out some news. If we're talking about what the biggest news item is, in terms of actual size, I gotta give it to the new Donkey Kong plushie available at Nintendo Tokyo. It stands at 76.5 centimeters and weighs 7.5 kilograms. The price? A clean 59,980 yen. So you need to decide if you want a Switch 2 or this. I think I'm going to skip this one, but I did see it on display at Nintendo Tokyo. He does look shaggier than I expected, so if you are the world's most hardcore DK fan, it might be worth putting it on your radar. Or you could just buy a spare Switch 2 just in case. But Nintendo had some other announcements these past few days. Mario Paint is now on NSO, which is honestly one of the more interesting additions they've ever done. Before Switch 2 came out, there was some data mining that revealed Nintendo was toying with mouse controls on NSO, so some assumed Mario Paint would be added. And since Switch 2 has native mouse support with the Joy-Cons, it makes much more sense to wait until that came out to release Mario Paint. Hopefully this opens up the door for more mouse games like Mario and Wario. I am not a Mario Paint expert, but my wife has secretly been a Mario Paint fanatic all these years, and she got really excited playing it on NSO. It is such a surprisingly complex game that was honestly way ahead of its time, and is still incredibly impressive from a design perspective even today. So definitely worth checking out if you've never touched it. But if you want new games, Nintendo has some. They hosted a partner showcase in an indie world. For that first event, they started off strong with Monster Hunter Stories 3 and Once Upon a Katamari. Stories 2 is one of the best JRPGs on Switch, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't really care about Monster Hunter. But it's great to see the series is still continuing. And since the protagonist is older than a kid, it does make me wonder if they are trying to appeal to a more older audience with this one. Which I wouldn't particularly mind. The series has a lot of potential that I still think is untapped. I do believe a lot of people just ignore the series either because they don't like Monster Hunter, or they do, but Stories kind of looks like a game for babies. But trust me, the gameplay is fundamentally sound, it has a great art style, and an addictive gameplay loop. I do think the battle system might be a little too simplistic for some people, but I think they can easily improve upon that in this third game. But this is easily one of my most anticipated games for 2026. Once Upon a Katamari, it's always great to see this series come back. Of course, is it really Katamari without Keita Takahashi? Maybe not, but this is their first real stab at a new console game in a long, long time. It's been in remake and mobile game limbo for over a decade. The last new non-mobile Katamari game was what? Touch My Katamari on the Vita? In 2011? There's plenty of room for new ideas and improvements, but again, the issue with the series is that We Love Katamari was almost too good, so there wasn't much left to do. The well was dry, people got their fill. But it's been a while, and if this new game has a lot of interesting mechanics and is reasonably priced, I can see it boost the Katamari series a little bit. Namco has been really aggressive with promoting it here in Japan. There's a ton of new merch and a Katamari pop-up cafe that I went to that I will talk about in the future, so Namco is trying seriously to revive the franchise. The other big announcements were two from Square Enix, The Adventures of Elliot, The Millennium Tales, and Octopath Traveler 0. Both HD 2D games, but Elliot is an action RPG, not too far from Ys or maybe even The Legend of Zelda. I haven't tried the demo yet, but a lot of people say it's promising. But come on, we gotta change the title. No offense to any Elliots out there, but you can't just call a game The Adventures of Elliot. Even The Adventure of Link kind of went too far. But I am glad to see that they are trying new things with HD 2D. We've had JRPGs, strategy RPGs, and now action RPGs. An HD 2D Match 3 game isn't that far off. If I can be a bit nitpicky here, I know the HD 2D games are all about nostalgia and classic JRPG settings, but I do wonder how much rope is left on this idea. We've got a guy dressed up like a red mage, he has a leafy fairy companion. Please tell me this story has some juice to it. Bravely Default, another game with a very generic Final Fantasy adjacent setting, but they actually did something interesting with the story there, so I'm hoping Elliot isn't just by the numbers when it comes to that department. And there's a lot more coming. We also had an Indie World presentation. The big game for me is UFO 50, something I've been waiting to hit Switch for a while, and they thankfully shadow dropped it after the presentation. We also got a date for the follow-up from the Shovel Knight developers, Mina the Hollower, which hits this Halloween. And the other game I'm mostly interested in is Caves of Cud, which also has a 2025 date. And I can't say I'm going to buy this, but one of the more intriguing titles is Glaciered from Japanese developer studio Snowblind. It takes place millions of years in the future on an icy Earth, and you are I guess like a swimming bird/fish that explores the ocean. It looks to be an action RPG with upgrades and real-time combat. I'm kind of skeptical about how well an underwater action game plays, but it is a very distinct title that is a console exclusive for Switch 2 that is coming out later this year. It's one of those games that's really intriguing, but I don't know if I'm going to like it, so I might wait for reviews or impressions. But I am glad to see something so weird pop up in the indie world. The Japanese indie world also had some other news, like Exit 8 is getting a Switch 2 edition on August 29th, and it will be free if you own the game. So 2 shows, a couple of games from each I'm interested in, but are we just days away from a big boy Nintendo Direct? Nintendo will be at Gamescom in late August, and they recently announced that Silksong, Hades 2, Elden Ring, and Final Fantasy VII Remake will be playable at the show. There's no guarantee they announce their release date for these titles before the demo event, but it is weird to hold a demo event for, say, Elden Ring, and then be like, I don't know when it's coming out. I think an upcoming Direct is a lock, with early September being the latest they could possibly shove it out. We have a few big first-party titles with no date still. I do wonder if Nintendo is just going to skip September in terms of game releases, though. I can see them doubling up November with Air Riders and Prime 4, with Hyrule Warriors hitting in December. But that's a pretty cramped holiday season. I think a game like Prime 4 in September would give it a lot more room since the August Nintendo titles are on the smaller end. So, 3 Directs in 3 weeks? Not impossible, but we'll just have to see. That's all for now. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well, it really helps. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends on social media. The next episode will be on August 24th. See you next time. Matane!